Hi everybody, welcome back. So finally, we're diving into pyRevit development, and it's gonna be really exciting. And we could jump straight into the code editor and begin typing our Revit API code. But I'd like us to take a step back so I can introduce a framework on how to actually create robust pyRevit tools from scratch. So not only you understand how to write code, you also need to understand how to plan it, how to create proof of concept, how to refine it, and most importantly, how to stress test it so it doesn't break if you decide to share it with your team. So in this lesson, I'd like to introduce you to my framework on creating pyRevit tools from scratch. So let's go through this 7-step process for new pyRevit tools. And it will help you to take any idea you might have. It might be rough and vague, and then we're going to take it through these 7 steps and end up with a working tool, which is going to be robust and most importantly, stress tested. And this is the same framework I use for every new tool that I build. No matter what idea we might have, following these steps will give you kind of better results in less time with more predictable outcomes. And to begin, I want to say right away, forget about perfect code on the first try. It does not happen. You see, tutorials show you clean code working on the first try, but the real development, it isn't like that. You will write messy code. You will get stuck. And bugs, well, they will pile up. That's normal. Even I do that. Even I go through all of that. It's just part of the process. But tutorials often skip this. And I get it. I also make this kind of tutorials because, well, that's how we make tutorials. And you see, what keeps you stuck is actually trying to write perfect script from scratch. Because probably that's what you see in tutorials and that's what you expect in your own development. But it's not really like that. And also, you might be watching tutorials but building zero tools. We also copy paste a lot of AI code, and if you don't understand it, well, that's a recipe for disaster. And like you cannot be sure of what kind of tools you share with your team. But what actually works is building tools before we are ready. Because if you constantly watch tutorials, you will never build tools. It's just the way it is. Instead, just follow the proven 7 steps for every single tool. It's gonna guide you and help you. And don't worry, we will always start with ugly proof of concept first and then polish it later. And that's how you will ship robust and tested tools. So, what is this framework? And it always starts with one idea for a tool you want to create, and you're going to follow the same 7 steps. And it works for any tool you can imagine because, well, it's kind of the fundamental framework, I think. Because, first of all, we need to plan what we are doing and why. After that, we go into research where we still, like an artist, find all the help we can get. After that, it's good to create an outline in plain English, no code yet. And then we begin coding stage, where first of all, we code quick and dirty. Our goal is just to create proof of concept and just prove to ourselves that it works and also that it's useful. Because sometimes we create tools, look at them and like, not exactly what I expected. After that, we go into edit phase, and that's where we start to polishing, adding all features, making it more kind of optimized. And when we think that our code is ready, many people stop here. But actually, we have to go to the next step, stress test. This is where we have to break it in every way possible before anyone else can. But also, many people skip this step because, well, it's not as exciting, and this is also where most of the issues come in. But this is what makes your tools really robust and good. And funny thing also, it's one of the most repetitive steps because it's always the same things that break in our code. And once we're going to go through all of that, we're going to be ready to ship it to our real users. And now let's go through all of the 7 steps on a real tool that we're going to create. And the tool is going to be Name Swapper. It's going to help you rename views in bulk instead of clicking them one by one. And the tool is quite simple. We just need to select views, define renaming rules, then we're going to rename views, and we need to report the changes so we know what happened. We're also going to create a very simple UI, not like that, it's going to be much simpler, but this is just to illustrate what happens. We're going to grab a bunch of different views, define rules, and we're going to get new views with just one button click. And first of all, plan based on a real problem. Because before opening code editor, you need to define a real problem and understand why you even automate it. For example, every project is full of views and renaming them by hand is really tedious. Standards change, new batches get created, requirements shift, maybe we just want to rename it for some other reason, doesn't matter. So the plan is we want to create one tool to rename views in bulk with a friendly UI, so anyone can use it very quickly to rename a bunch of views. And to decide, is it worth automating, there are a bunch of questions you can come up yourself. For example, is it repetitive? Yes. Does it happen on every project? Yes. Can anyone on the team use it? Yes. The most importantly, is it worth automating? Absolutely. It's going to be a really useful tool. So just make sure that you solve real problems. After that, we just go to the research. And here, we just need to look everywhere. Google, YouTube, docs, forums. Nowadays, mostly we're going to go to AI and ask it to research for us. But the idea here is just to find something that can help us. Because oftentimes there are already existing tools that do pretty much the same thing, or maybe something close, or maybe there's like one of the steps already kind of complete somewhere. So here you just kind of gather different resources. Maybe you find a video, you learn how to select views with pyRevit. You're gonna find some blogs and realize that oh, there are forbidden symbols for view names. You're gonna find some examples how to handle certain issues if name exists for example. In documentation, you can learn that, for example, we can rename views by just using the property instead of using parameters or some methods. And we can even find how to create simple UI forms that's going to give us more than enough. In here, again, just look everywhere, don't spend too much time on it. Just try to gather something useful that will help you. Later, you can also feed it to AI to help it you even more, or at least you will have a better understanding yourself. And after that, we're going to go to outline, where we're going to define pseudocode in plain English. No code yet. Because if you cannot put it in kind of plain English, well, you're not ready to write Python code either. And in programming, it's a very common concept where we take one big problem and we need to break down in as many small problems as possible so it's easier to manage and solve them. And for this case, well, also all of these steps, they're going to become kind of the steps inside your code. So we can define also in code editor straight away what we need to create. So first of all, we need to select views in the project. That's clear. Then we need to define some kind of renaming rules, either hard-coded or maybe with UI forms. Then we're going to rename each view one by one, well, using code, and report what changed. So first of all, we can even put it on paper, just kind of write step 1, step 2, step 3, and then later that's going to become the base of our code. And with that in mind, we're going to go to the code. The goal here, first of all, it's really important. We start always quick and dirty. Do not try to spend days and weeks trying to make first steps perfect. Here, we just want to create proof of concept fast. We just kind of skip some steps, hard code values. If it's ugly, that's totally fine. We just build it one step at a time. And for example, here we would be how to select views. Okay, we've learned from research that's how we can get views. Very simple, just 2 lines. For defining rules, again, we're gonna cut corners where we can. We're just gonna define something to test it. Okay, that's how we're gonna do this. Then we're just gonna go through all the views. We're gonna define what's the old name, what's the new name, applying this kind of rules, and we're just gonna rename it. And also we're gonna report in Revit what's actually changing. And since we're making changes in Revit project, we also have to use something called transaction. This is when you allow your code to make changes to your project. Because by default, you cannot change anything in your projects. That's the beauty of Revit API. There are some safeguards so beginners cannot really mess up the project without even knowing it. And I also want to share a quick story because in the beginning of my journey, I remember I tried to create something similar to this die roots pro sheets before it even existed. And at the time, I spent close to maybe 2 weeks creating a perfect UI form without even knowing how to create UI forms. And I didn't have AI back then. So I spent all this time working on the first steps to make my UI looks good. But then I realized I have no idea how to make the PDFs because, well, Revit was clunky and it wasn't that easy. So I had to abandon it. But if I would just focus on proof of concept, I would know day one that I couldn't make it. And I would just move to other tools. So yeah, focus on proof of concept first of all. And once it works, for example, you wrote this code, it gives you some results. It might kind of work, even if it breaks half the time, at least you know what's going on. And after that, we are ready to go to the edit phase. That's where we can add more features, optimize it, make it better, like just kind of make it a little bit more robust. Because you see, once your proof of concept works, now we can polish it. We can swap hard-coded values with the real UI, we can add new features. And for example, before, we just hard-coded the values, but in this stage, we can actually spend some time and create UI form because we know we can achieve everything else. And here's like the progression. Normally the tools, like first of all, you're going to create your proof of concept. Then you can add your UI layer. Then maybe you're going to change the output to be kind of tables, so it's a bit nicer. Maybe some linkify so you can select the views, quickly open them. And that's how you slowly go to your final tool, just step by step without kind of jumping too fast. And after that, many people think that, all right, tool is ready, send it to the team. And that's usually where you're going to get some of this kind of weird looks because people going to click on your button, get an error, and then think like, did I break something? Or I had those moments. It's always awkward. And you as a coder, you will look and like, oh, I just made that typo somewhere. But they don't know that. Your users will not know that and they will get scared of clicking your buttons. So be careful. That's why we're going to do stress test. We're going to break it before anyone else can. And this is where your tools become production ready. And it's mostly the same breaks on nearly every tool. For example, oftentimes users select nothing and they break your form, or user closes UI too early without selecting correctly. Maybe new names already exist in the project, so we're gonna get an error there. Maybe use some forbidden symbols where you shouldn't. And you see, you just have to kind of go through, kind of logically dissect your code step by step and kind of think of all these issues. But once you know the issues, solving them is like way easier than finding them. Because then you can exit early with a friendly alert like, hey, you haven't selected anything. If they closed UI too early, we can check the values and again alert them like, hey, you haven't selected correct things. We can add some try and accept statements just to avoid issues. We can also clean their kind of input so it doesn't include any forbidden symbols and so on. This is just one example, but just to get an idea that you always have to think about these terms. If there's UI, think about how can you break it. If there's like step to get elements, what if they didn't get elements? What if there are no elements in the project? What if they got wrong elements if you allowed it, right? So it always so we always have to spend enough time here. And at first it's gonna be a bit painful, but over time it gets very repetitive. And if you are in pyRevit school, we're gonna go through the whole debugging protocol. I'm gonna show you the most common places where it breaks. It's gonna get much easier. And after that, we're gonna go to the final, most exciting step, where we're gonna ship our new tool. We're gonna put it in production, add it to the toolbar, and let other people use it. That's where you're gonna get the most satisfaction. And for example, we here are gonna create like a new swapper with improved UI. The stress test passed. We cannot break it anymore. Maybe some users can, and then we're gonna fix it again. That's totally fine as well. But in our opinion, that's gonna be ready for deployment. Now that's where you bring value at scale, even when you sleep. Because the thing about the development, it's one of the best ways to get leverage on your time. Regular Revit users, they spend X amount of hours working, they get Y returns. And it's quite consistent, even if they get better, there is a limit how far. With code, well, there is no limit depending on the task you solve. Because you wrote your code once, and it can produce results over and over. Not just for your team, maybe for multiple offices, maybe you even share your tools. That's the beauty of programming. And these are the 7 steps to create any pyRevit tool from scratch. And I highly recommend you to repeat it until it's a habit, because it will naturally happen anyway, but if you are conscious, it will happen much sooner. So now, let's build it together in the next lesson.